It's been over a year since both of their injuries, but Tyler Wells and Kyle Bradish are getting closer and closer to coming back to the big leagues. I'll get you updated on their rehab, talk about some minor league news, and another Orioles loss coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Wednesday, August 6th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 5-0 loss to the Philadelphia Phillies on Tuesday night. We'll talk about the lack of offense, the so-so start from Dean Kremer. Then we will discuss Kyle Bradish and Tyler Wells, who might be joining this Orioles rotation soon. Both of them are progressing well on their rehab assignments. Get you updates on both of them. And then finally, kind of the negative part of not only the draft, but the trade deadline when you're a seller. You bring in a lot of new minor league players. Well, there are roster limits. It means guys have to get released. We'll bid farewell to all of the players the Orioles released over the past week or so. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So we start today's episode with yet another Orioles loss. Final score from Citizens Bank Park on Tuesday was the Phillies 5 and the Orioles nothing, as the O's have dropped the first two games of this three-game set in Philly and fall to 51 and 63 on the season. And the Orioles are now 1-4 since the trade deadline. They ended up, trading 6 players on the day of, 9 players from their big league roster overall. Let's start with what went right for the Orioles on Tuesday. Dean Kremer was fine in this game. He obviously gives up 4 runs, but I wouldn't necessarily call him the biggest problem from this loss. His final line, 6 innings of 4-run ball. He allows 8 hits, struck out 6, walked only 1, did allow a home run and threw 103 pitches in this one. He's now got a 4.35 ERA on the season. This certainly was not the best Kremer, right? I thought he was really good in the first inning. Went 1-2-3, struck out Kyle Schwarber on a nasty inside cutter, then got Bryce Harper swinging through a 3-2 splitter to get a couple of big strikeouts in that first inning, but came back out there in the second and just wasn't himself. He gave up the RBI double to Marsh, the 2-run homer to Max Kepler, and all of a sudden it's a 3-0 game. Just threw a fastball down and in where he certainly wasn't trying to throw that pitch to Kepler when he's kind of been struggling this year with Philly, but he got a big swing right there. And then there was a couple extra base hits in the fourth that pushed across the fourth run for the Phillies. Otherwise, though, for Kremer, I thought command was solid. He only walked 1. What really looked good was the splitter. This was the rare occasion where I thought the splitter was great, but it didn't end up being a great start overall. Generally, those things have matched up this season so far for Dean Kremer. If he's got the good splitter, he's going to have a good line. He didn't have a terrible line, but the splitter got 10 whiffs on 17 swings against Phillies hitters. He really attacked the good lefties like Schwarber and Harper in this lineup with that split finger pitch, and it did its job. The rest of his offerings kind of didn't. The cutter was solid. The ones he threw into lefties, he was throwing them away to righties at times, and the command could have been a little bit better, but his fastballs weren't as crisp as they have been this season when Kremer's been on. That was probably, I would say, the number one issue for Dean in this one. Like all year, he's just been pounding the strike zone with his fastballs. Four-seamer only had a 50% in-zone rate. The sinker only had a 39% in-zone rate, and that led to, in total, just 41% of Kremer's pitches being in the strike zone on Tuesday. He's been a guy who's been sitting around 60% at times this year when he's been really good. So again, when you only walk 1 in 6 innings, you can say command wasn't bad, but you're nibbling too much, you're getting behind too much, and you're allowing balls to get hit hard when you come in the middle of the plate. That's what happened. I thought the splitter was dancing. It was mostly out of the zone, but he was still getting chase on it, which is really good too. It is what it is. For a lot of times with what this lineup should have been this year, your starter gives you 6 innings of 4-run ball. It's a good chance to win that baseball game. That wasn't the case on Tuesday, because what went wrong is the Orioles once again did not score. Shut out by Phillies pitching on Tuesday night. Taijuan Walker, who certainly have a bounce back season for Philly, goes 6 scoreless, 4 hits, 4 Ks, no walks. The Orioles did not draw a walk in this game. They had, 2 base runners against the Phillies bullpen, maybe 1. I mean, Jordan Westberg was like the only guy who did anything in this game. He went 2 for 3, had a couple of singles, was also hit by a pitch. He was the only Oriole to reach base more than once. There were otherwise singles from Adley, Kobe Mayo, and Jeremiah Jackson. Those were the rest of the hits. The Orioles, a lot of strikeouts in this game. They struck out 10 times. And then after Walker, it was Orion Kerkering, Matt Strahm, Max Lazar, 3 straight scoreless innings to finish this one for Philly. The Orioles only had 4 total hard hit balls, all of them against Walker. 2 from Adley, 1 from Westberg, 1 from Mayo. That was it. I mean, just no quality contact at all. You're striking out. You're not walking. You're going to have a bad offensive day. And they are shut out again. And this Oriole offense, as you remember, right before the trade deadline, I mean, they were on a heater, right? They scored all those runs against the Rockies. They bludgeoned the Blue Jays a couple of times in that series. Even in the one loss in that Blue Jay series was a 9-8 loss. It certainly wasn't on the offense. And then they had the off day Thursday. They trade away 6 players, including 2 of their 3 best hitters in Ramon Laureano and Ryan O'Hearn being sent to San Diego. And they come out Friday in Chicago. They get 8 innings of 1-run ball from Trevor Rogers, and they lose 1-0. They don't score a lot over the weekend. They get 3 runs Monday. They don't score here. They've scored 10 total runs in the 5 games since the deadline. That is 2 runs per game. That is not going to cut it. In the 6 games before the deadline, they were averaging 10.2 runs per game. Those were the kind of numbers they were putting up. And obviously, you're never going to average 10 runs per game for a long stretch. You really can't be averaging 2 runs per game for a long stretch. You gotta find somewhere in the middle. The Orioles have not done that. The offense has not looked good. And I'm sure some of it is just like the jolt of, losing some beloved guys in the clubhouse and losing some of your more productive hitters and the lineup looking very different. But some of it is just like these other guys who are here and part of the core got to step up, and it'll come. It's just not happening right now. And it's certainly tough to watch. Shout out for Tuesday. I'll shout out Grant Wolfram. Came out of the bullpen through a scoreless 7th. Yaramil Geraldo gave up a home run, gave up 1 run in the 8th in this one. But Wolfram did allow a single to Schwarber, but otherwise struck out Bryson Stott, struck out Trey Turner, got Bryce Harper to hit a lazy pop-up to end that 7th inning. His stuff looked nasty. 12 of his 20 pitches for the rookie lefty were sliders, and that thing was moving across the zone. Phillies hitters, I mean, they had no chance really against that slider on Tuesday night. I think Wolfram from the left side, he goes up there. The velo was way up in this game too. Like, he was sitting 97 to 98 with the sinker and the 4-seamer. I mean, that's pretty impressive from the left side with a wipeout slider. And he dropped in a curveball for a big strikeout as well. He had the feel for all 4 pitches really in this one. He's had a couple of good outings, a couple of rough outings since joining this bullpen. I really believe, and again, I've said it, the Orioles need to look for at minimum 2 of these kind of up and down, out of nowhere bullpen guys. They need to look for at least 2 of them to prove themselves enough to be part of the 2026 bullpen. If they can get 3, that's amazing, but the goal should be 2. My prediction is that Grant Wolfram is going to be one of those 2. I think the stuff he has from the left side, he could give you what Gregory Soto gives you. And maybe that's not a closer type, but that's a good high stuff, can get big outs type of left-handed pitcher you want to have in your bullpen, and it's a cheap replacement for Gregory Soto. And I think Wolfram's going to be that. There's going to be some growing pains this year, but the O's are going to let him go through that. And there's going to be some nights where it just looks electric like it did on Tuesday, but not much Grant Wolfram could do as his buddies on the hitting side got nothing done, and the Orioles lose 5-0 to the Phillies. But in better Orioles news, a couple of starting pitchers who we've been missing are getting closer and closer. Kyle Bradish made his 3rd rehab start on Sunday. Tyler Wells made his 2nd on Tuesday. They're both already in AAA Norfolk. They're getting close here. I'll give you the full breakdown and updates on their rehab assignments and talk about when they could rejoin the Orioles. That's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Day Hue. For Orioles fans like me, this one hits the mark. Game Day Hue makes clean, no-logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. It's all about letting your colors speak for you. No giant logos, just smart, versatile style that works on game day, on the course, or anywhere in between. And for me, I love the game day Hugh hat because I've got a couple of the orange and white ones. They're simple. They go with anything. I can wear them to the ballpark. I can wear them out. It's a very versatile hat, but it's not just the hats. Check out their split shade gloves made for the golf course, or the perfect gift for the fan who has everything. And right now, you can get 15% off with code MLB15 at GameDayHue.com. That's GameDayHue.com. The code even stacks on bundle deals, so now's the time to load up. Let your colors talk, because colors speak louder than words. That's GameDayHue.com, code MLB15. So despite another Orioles loss on Tuesday night, there is hope. There is good news coming around the corner, because Kyle Bradish and Tyler Wells, who both got elbow surgery, kind of different versions of Tommy John last season, and have missed the remainder of the year, have missed all of 2025 so far. They are getting closer to being back. They are both on rehab assignments right now, and now they've pitched enough down there where it's feeling real. So wanted to get an update on those two guys. Let's start with Kyle Bradish, who had the Tommy John and the internal brace surgery last June. Kind of the timeline on him: Orioles announced when they started spring training last February that Bradish, who was coming off that awesome, top 5 Cy Young finish season in 2023, that he was having some elbow issues. They weren't going surgery yet. They were going to shut him down. They were going to do the PRP injections and rest and try to throw again in 6 weeks. He did that. It got him back to a big league mound in May. He made a handful of starts. He was actually really, really good in those starts, but he had that start actually against the Phillies in June of last year, and just the pain was too much. There was a good story in the Baltimore Banner a couple of weeks ago about Bradish really detailing the pain he was going through, even all the way back to the 2023 season, how much pain, how much rehab he had to do, how much prep he had to do just to go out there and start every 5 days. It was clearly something that was building up. He wanted to go back out there, didn't want to get surgery, felt he could pitch through it because he was doing it the previous season. And the pain was just more in 2024 than it was the year before. So the Orioles finally ended up getting the Tommy John surgery and the internal brace last June. The rehab going well. He was basically on schedule the entire time. Made a rehab start in Aberdeen, then made a rehab start in AA Chesapeake. And then on Sunday, he made his first rehab start in Norfolk and his third overall. Went 3 innings. The line wasn't super great. 6 hits, 7 runs, 5 of them earned, 3 strikeouts, 1 walk, 1 homer, and 57 pitches for Bradish in Norfolk. Now, there was some rough defense in the first inning by Carter Young at second base for the Tides. Only one of them was called an error, but 2 of them could have been. It was 2 really tough plays that should have been 2 outs for Bradish, and it really extended what kind of ended up being a laborious first inning for him. Now, he wasn't great at times after that, but probably kind of threw off the groove for him. Now, shout out to Carter Young, who did actually have the comeback walk-off hit in that Sunday win for the Tides, so a little bit of better stuff for him. But more importantly, he did get 10 whiffs on 27 swings. His fastballs sat at 95. He was up to 98.1 miles an hour. That was the hardest pitch he threw. You love to see that. That's kind of the normal velocity for Kyle Bradish. His slider was a little bit slower than it used to be. That pitch kind of sat at 88 last year. It was more at 86 in the rehab outing, but still looked good, had good movement. If the slider loses a couple ticks, not the end of the world at all. He threw 37 pitches in the first start, 38 in the second one in AA, and threw more in the bullpen after he came out, and then was up to 57 Sunday in Norfolk. So most likely he'll pitch Friday for the Tides, and you hope he can push towards 70 pitches. Then he'll throw another rehab start, you would think, and you want him to get over 80 pitches. That's probably like next Wednesday when he would throw. And there's a potential that after 2 more rehab starts, he could feel good enough to come back, and kind of the earliest date you could target would be Monday, August 18th in Boston. That's less than 2 weeks away, that he could theoretically return to this Orioles rotation. Now, because it's Tommy John, especially because the Orioles are out of it, they're not really playing for anything, I would push that back to maybe 1 more rehab start. So the date I'm circling right now, and this is not inside information, this is just kind of seeing how he's progressing, watching his starts, and doing math. I would circle Sunday, August 24th at Camden Yards against the Astros. It'd be cool to do it in a home game as well for the Kyle Bradish return. I'm not saying lock it in. I'm not saying go get your tickets for that one because it's going to happen. That is my current guess. I mean, that's pretty fun. You still got a little waiting. It's still more than 3 weeks away, but that is this month. And as important as Kyle Bradish is to this team, was to this rotation, yeah, it's not going to matter if he's here for the final 5 weeks of this season. The O's are out of it. But at the very least, if he can make, 5 starts even in the big leagues down the stretch, if you can just get the rust off, get him back in his groove, have a regular offseason, and be raring to go in spring training, that is the ideal scenario for the Orioles here. And then there is Tyler Wells, who also had the surgery last year. Now, Wells' season was a little bit different. He was healthy in spring training. He made 3 starts at the beginning of the year, began the year in the Orioles rotation, felt something after that 3rd start, went on the injured list. They tried multiple things, rehab, rest. He tried to throw again. It just didn't work out. And 2 months later, it turned out he didn't need the full Tommy John, but he did need that kind of similar, a little less invasive internal brace surgery last June. Got his surgery around the similar time Bradish did. He's been a little pushed back. I don't think he's really had a setback, but him and his wife had a baby earlier this year, and it was after Wells was already throwing, I believe. So I think that kind of shut down his rehab for a little bit, which, yeah, absolutely. Go be with your family, especially when you're doing Tommy John rehab. Probably the perfect time for a Major League Baseball player and his family to have a baby. So go take care of that. I think that's why he's still kind of behind Bradish in the process, but not by that much, right? He made his 2nd rehab start. He made 1 on Wednesday in Double-A Chesapeake, threw 22 pitches and 2 perfect innings. Then he threw last night, Tuesday, for Norfolk, bumped up the usage a little bit, 2 1/3 innings, 3 hits, no runs, 4 Ks, 2 walks, and more than doubled his pitch count through 49 pitches on Tuesday, which is a good sign. Through all 5 of his pitches. His 4-seam fastball sat at 93. It was up to 95. I like the velocity. Got 7 whiffs on 24 swings, including 4 on his 4-seam fastball. He was a little erratic. He was under 50% on his zone rate, but some of the research suggests that actually command takes longer than stuff to return after you get Tommy John surgery. So even though Tyler Wells, who's like a command master and doesn't walk anybody, it might take a little bit longer for him to get back to that level once he gets to the big leagues. But Wells is clearly behind Bradish, right? Bradish threw 57 pitches. Wells threw 49. He's 1 rehab start behind. You could call him probably a week behind Bradish at this point. So there is a chance that you maybe target Tyler Wells as the roster expansion guy. Remember, you get to add 1 hitter and 1 pitcher on September 1st to add to the roster, and maybe Wells kind of becomes that guy. But there's also the question of, are the Orioles fully building him up as a starter, or are they just going to build him up to be a multi-inning reliever and bring him back? If they do that, he could come back sooner than Bradish because he doesn't have to build up to a pitch count of 90 plus. He can get to 50 or 60 at most and be good. I just think with the way that Wells has still had success in his career as a starter, I think long-term he's just going to be a good reliever for this Orioles team, but it's worth it for the O's now, especially when they're out of it. Like if the O's were in it, they would be bringing back Wells as a reliever. I have no doubts about that. They're out of it. They're going to build him back a little bit slower, make him a starter, have that option for you heading into spring training of next year. And so I think he'll be a little bit behind Bradish. So maybe somewhere, like that September 1st, maybe I'd target that for Tyler Wells. A little less certain on that one, but just exciting to see those two coming back soon. And it'll be at least a positive jolt into this team with a lot of negative going on. Now, while those two are still rehabbing, there are obviously still innings to cover, and there's a lot of rotating names going on in this rotation, more so the bullpen than the rotation. Well, they added another new one on Tuesday. It's actually an old friend, as the Orioles made another waiver claim. I've mentioned with all the open spots they have, the open 40-man roster spots they have, they're going to be making a lot of waiver claims. They've already done it. And they made another one Tuesday. Rico Garcia, the 31-year-old right-handed pitcher, was claimed off waivers by the Orioles from the New York Mets. Now, Garcia is out of minor league options, so most likely he's going to report to the Orioles in Philly at some point today. He will have to be added to the roster. Most likely either Elvin Rodriguez or Yarmil Jurado will be optioned back to AAA Norfolk to make room for Garcia. But who is Rico Garcia? A Hawaii native drafted by the Rockies in the 30th round of the draft all the way back in 2016. Debuted with the Rockies in 2019, went over the Giants for 2020, then missed all of 2021 after getting Tommy John surgery, and then the Orioles signed him. Picked him up on a minor league deal in November of 2021. He started the year, and they activated him in May, coming back from the injury, worked his way up to AAA, and then the Orioles called him up June 13th of 2022, right before they started to turn that season around. They brought him up, and I didn't even remember this, but it jogged my memory. The reason why the Orioles called up Garcia, it wasn't an injury. It wasn't that just, oh, he's pitching well and we want a new pitcher up here. It was to replace Keegan Aiken because the Orioles were going to Toronto to play the Blue Jays, and you could not cross the border into Toronto without proof of COVID vaccination. And as we know, Keegan Aiken did not have his COVID vaccine. And so Aiken could not travel with the Orioles for, it might have been even a 4-game series. And so that is how Rico Garcia got his break in the big leagues last year. Ended up pitching 6 games for the Orioles, was up and down throughout the season, but he did have a 1.99 ERA and 45 innings in the minors that year. Then he briefly pitched for the Nats and the Athletics in the big leagues in 2023, was with the Nats in AAA all of last year with solid numbers. And then he signed a minor league deal with the Mets this offseason, began the year in AAA, got called up, and has been awesome for the Mets. 8 appearances out of the bullpen, 12 2/3 innings, 7 hits, 3 earned runs, 16 strikeouts to 2 walks and a home run. But obviously the Mets, they made a lot of bullpen additions, including our own Gregory Soto at the deadline. So kind of ran out of room for Rico Garcia to be on that roster. They had DFA'd him once. He was claimed by the Yankees. The Yankees pitched him in 1 game, DFA'd him. Mets got him back, pitched him in a few more games. Then they DFA'd him over the weekend, and the Orioles make the claim. Now, at this point, when he was with the Orioles last time, he was mostly fastball at 96 and then a changeup and a sweeper. Now his fastball sits more 95, but it still plays up. He averages 19.6 inches of induced vertical break on that 4-seam fastball. That's kind of that pseudo rising action that the fastball has. That would be the 8th most ride among any big league pitchers this year. He's throwing way more curveballs than he used to, especially against lefties. The pitch has a lot sharper downward break than it's used to. And he also changed up his slider. He used to throw the bigger, slower sweeper. Now he throws a firmer slider. The velo's up from 83 with the Orioles a couple years ago to now 87. That pitch has a 41% swing and miss rate in the big leagues this year. He still has that changeup, but it's not very good. It kind of gets crushed. So he's lowered that usage a lot. But Garcia looks a lot more interesting than he did when he pitched for the Orioles 3 years ago. Like, it was really good stuff. Like, I saw some Mets fans that were kind of upset that they took him off the roster with how well he was pitching in kind of those multi-inning stints out of their bullpen. He had been great. Now, he wasn't pitching in super high leverage, but he was still throwing the ball well. He could be something. Maybe he won't. Maybe he's just innings filler. A lot of these guys will be innings filler. Some of them will stick. Maybe Garcia can stick. And 5 of his 8 outings with the Mets this year were at least 2 innings of work. So he can definitely provide some length in that Oriole bullpen, which is helpful as well. And so we'll see what he can do in his second time around in an Oriole uniform. But Garcia being another player who is added to this organization. Again, it's going to force either Rodriguez or Geraldo to be optioned down to AAA. And that's just adding more players to the minor leagues, along with all the Orioles draft picks and all the prospects they got via trade. There are unfortunately rules with how many minor league players you can employ, which means when you bring in a lot of them, you have to release a lot of them. Kind of the tough other darker side of this part of the year. Just want to bid farewell, give a shout out to all the players who played some good years in this system, but were released this week by the Orioles. That's coming up next to finish off the show. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are also building wealth. And for me, I share my finances with my wife, and I think the best part is that you can put everything in one place with Monarch Money. There's also a super good app that just puts everything in one place. They really just make it easy for you. And that's great. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So we finish things up today with the more upsetting side of the trade deadline. The Orioles trade deadline was kind of upsetting this year anyway, because they were unexpected sellers, at least from what we expected from the beginning of this year. But the Orioles, they had a great draft. They brought in 21 talented players. They got a lot of talent at the trade deadline, right? They brought in 16 total prospects from the deadline. That is 37 new players who are going to be in your minor league system and not guys you're going to like release at the end of the year. They're going to be here at least for a couple of years in this system. Unfortunately, there are less minor league teams now. There are stricter roster limits on how many minor league players you can carry on each team and in the system as a whole. That means when you bring in 37 guys, you got to release somewhere close to 37 guys. And the Orioles didn't release quite that many. You have other things you can do, put guys on the restricted list, other things, put them in the FCL, but it's a lot of guys getting released and a lot of names that many might even recognize that are gone from this system. And it's a tough part of this, right? We want to celebrate these new young players coming in, but there are some guys who have grinded in this system who are now, the dream might be over for them, or at least they're in a tough spot looking for another role in professional baseball. So just wanted to shout out these guys, give them one last farewell as they leave the Orioles system. Let's start with Nate Webb, 27-year-old right-handed pitcher, the first of this list, who was released. Orioles signed him to a 2-year minor league deal before the 2024 season. You don't see a lot of 2-year minor league contracts, but it's because he had just had Tommy John surgery and was released from the Royals system where he got to AAA, but never the big leagues. And the Orioles knew he was going to miss the entirety of the 2024 season, but they wanted to jump on him before anyone else got him when he got healthier. So they signed him, helped him rehab the Tommy John. He returned this year, but in AAA, it didn't go great. 4.7 ERA and 44 innings as a reliever is not terrible, but he had basically as many walks as he did strikeouts, and it wasn't a lot of strikeouts. That was concerning. The Orioles released Nate Webb. We wish him the best moving on. Levi Stout, another 27-year-old right-handed pitcher. Orioles claimed him off waivers last season, kind of stuck him in AA, was dealing with some injury stuff, former solid pitching prospect. They were trying to get him right. Came into spring this year, and I was in love with Levi Stout. Had the huge riding action on his fastball. I had him as a breakout guy. I thought for sure he was going to appear in this Orioles bullpen, especially if they were going to be sellers and trade all their relievers. I thought no doubt Levi Stout pitches in this bullpen. Unfortunately, the season didn't go nearly as well as spring training did. In AAA, he threw 25 innings, had a 6.93 ERA with a low strikeout rate, and just kind of was not cutting it. Maybe the most surprising release of all of these guys is 23-year-old left-handed pitcher Riley Cooper, because it's been only 2 years since the Orioles drafted him. 13th round pick by the O's out of LSU in 2023. If you remember Cooper, he was the LSU closer on that Paul Skeens LSU team that won the College World Series. He closed out the final out of that legendary College World Series run. He was in high A this season. It wasn't going well. 32 innings, had a 5.68 ERA. Okay strikeout to walk ratio. He did get 5 appearances up in AA and really didn't look good in those. Just surprising that 2 years later they would release a guy like Cooper, but maybe they felt like he kind of maxed out on his stuff. 23-year-old righty Juan De Los Santos is the next one. Orioles international signing out of the Dominican Republic in 2019, part of the first Mike Elias, Kobe Perez international signing class. Between high A and AA this year, a 4.62 ERA in 25 innings, but with a 16% walk rate, just far too high right there. 21-year-old right-handed hitting second baseman Angel Tejada was released as well. International signing out of the DR in 2021. He was back in Aberdeen again this year and one homer, hitting 169 with a 39 WRC plus. It was not looking good with the bat. 22-year-old right-handed pitcher Randy Barragette was also released, another international signing from the Dominican Republic in that first 2019 class. He's missed most of this season with injury, had a 3.46 ERA in Delmarva last year, but a lot of walks. The Orioles let him come back, pitch a little bit this year, and then released him. Kevin Guerrero is a name you might know, 21-year-old right-handed hitting outfielder who came over to the Orioles from the Marlins as part of that Cole Sulser, Tanner Scott trade back in 2021, or before the 2022 season, I guess. He repeated Delmarva this year and had a 94 WRC plus with 2 homers. Anutis Mardon has been released, 21-year-old catcher, a 2021 international signing. Hit for a lot of power in Delmarva last year, was looking good, then got bumped to Aberdeen at the end of the year, but has just been horrendous with the bat in Aberdeen since then. Probably one of the reasons for his release. How about 25-year-old right-handed pitcher Devin Kirby, a knuckleballer who was signed by the Orioles early this year after the Twins had released him. He allowed 7 earned runs in 4 2/3 innings in Aberdeen. He was kind of just organization filler to have a knuckleballer for a little bit. 25-year-old right-handed pitcher Dominic Freeberger was also released, a local kid who was a converted hitter who the Orioles signed as an undrafted free agent out of UConn last year. 34 innings in Aberdeen this year, a 5.24 ERA with a 17% walk rate. It was going good for a while last season, but kind of took a wrong turn for him. Reese Sharp was also released, 24-year-old right-handed pitcher, 20th round pick by the Orioles in 2022 out of Indiana. He was a guy who got Tommy John, missed all of last season, came back this year and actually did have a 1.80 ERA in 20 innings as he rehabbed between the FCL and then Delmarva and then Aberdeen. But the Orioles, maybe somewhat surprisingly, did decide to release him. 27-year-old right-handed pitcher Robinson Martinez, who the Orioles signed to a minor league deal this offseason, throws super hard, doesn't really know where it's going. There was a lot of hype on him in spring training for some reason, even though he still didn't know where the ball was going. He mostly spent this year in Double-A. In 17 innings, he struck out 18, but he walked 19, and that is tough to do. 24-year-old lefty Raul Alcantara, also a minor league signing this offseason, a lefty who throws 100 miles an hour. Also had a 7.36 ERA with a 20% strikeout rate to an 18% walk rate. Began the year in AAA, was actually demoted to Double-A for most of the season, and is now released. Another surprising one, a name you might know, is 26-year-old right-handed pitcher Kyle Verbitsky. Remember the Cole Irvin trade when the Orioles got Cole Irvin from the A's for Darell Hernaiz before the 2023 season? They also got pitching prospect Kyle Verbitsky back in that deal as well. Been kind of between Aberdeen and Chesapeake the last 2 years. Actually had a good ERA, good strikeout to walk numbers in Double-A both seasons, but he is already 26 and hasn't really cemented himself in Double-A. 25-year-old left-handed pitcher Jared Beck, you may remember him, 13th round pick by the Orioles in 2022 out of St. Leo University. He is 7 feet tall. Had he made the majors, and I hope he still does, still has a chance, he would be the tallest big leaguer ever. Big strikeout numbers, but also big walk numbers. He's barely even pitched in Aberdeen, never got to Double-A, had a lot of injury issues, a lot of command issues. It'd be cool to see him make it, though. I really do hope things work out for him if he continues in baseball. 19-year-old righty Juan Raskin was released, a 2023 international signing who walked 18 batters in 15 innings in the FCL this year. 19-year-old right-handed pitcher Angel Bolivar, also a 2023 international signing, walked 12 batters and hit 4 in 18 and a third innings in the FCL this year. Yaderson Mora, 20-year-old right-handed pitcher, another 2023 international signing, walked 21 batters in 16 innings in the FCL this season. And finally, 18-year-old catcher Juan Garcia, the youngest player on this list to be released. He was a 2024 international signing from Venezuela, but played in only 11 games total this season between the DSL and the FCL, and he is out of the Orioles system as well. So by my count, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is great podcasting. 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 players released by the Orioles. And just want to give them a shout out here at the end, right? Because this is, for some of them could be it for their pro careers. For all of them, it's going to be it for their careers with the Orioles. You're very low chance you would hear their name on this podcast again. So I want to give them one final shout out. Thank you for their years of time in this Orioles system, some of the flashes they've shown, the times, some of these guys have been, I guarantee you on this podcast, I have talked about, well, really any of the guys who've been drafted, because I always talk about the draft, talked about Webb, I talked about Stout, I've talked about De Los Santos. I've talked about Kevin Guerrero coming in a trade. I've talked about Kirby, a knuckleballer, Freeberger, the local kid, Robinson Martinez throwing 100 in spring training. I've talked about Alcantara, Verbitsky coming in the trade. Like most of these guys have been mentioned a couple of times before on this podcast. So I want to give them some love and wish them all the best, whether it's baseball, not playing, but whatever it may be, wishing those guys all the best in their futures. And definitely is a tough part when you bring in that many players around the draft and the trade deadline as well. That was going to do it for today, but got one more piece of news here. Tyler O'Neill left the Orioles' loss on Tuesday in the 6th inning with what the Orioles called right wrist soreness. Now, luckily, we got news after the game. The x-rays on his wrist are negative. O'Neill said he jammed his wrist on the wall, taped it up, took another at-bat that wasn't feeling good, came out of the game. He said he will see how it feels before today's day game. I would guess he's probably not in the lineup today. Orioles get the off day Thursday, and then hopefully on Friday, he is back in there. And then some kind of ominous news as well coming from Annie Kuska of the Baltimore Banner, but shared by others from before the game, that he was kind of asked about Heston Kjerstad, who has been on the injured list with fatigue in AAA. And Mancelino said, quote, "I'm not ready to share yet, but we will talk it over and we'll figure out what to share with you guys, but nothing yet." I, I'm worried. I'm hoping this is not a beyond baseball kind of injury for Heston. Wishing him all the best, all the health issues he's already gone through. I mean, you don't want anybody going through anything, but especially Heston Kjerstad and all he's been through. You hope there's not something further going on there. So obviously wishing him the best. And then we did get a Zach Eflin update. He received an epidural in his lower back, according to Tony Mancelino. It's a shot in there. They're waiting for it to do do its work, and then they'll kind of see when he's going to come back. Felix Bautista has a follow-up appointment next week for that inflamed shoulder, and Colin Selby has a hamstring issue. He's going to be out at least a month for the Orioles. Shout out to Andy Koska for relaying all of that information as well. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for jumping in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Subscribe and follow, leave a rating and a review wherever you listen. It really helps out the pod. Orioles trying to avoid the sweep. They got a day game. You can watch some baseball at work. And hey, there's one good thing to watch down the stretch. Trevor Rogers. I mean, he's been the best pitcher in baseball the last 2 months. Full stop. ERA-wise. He goes against the lefty Ranger Suarez, who's having an amazing year as well. He's got a 2.68 ERA in 16 starts this season. Should be a good pitcher's duel at Citizens Bank. 12:35 on Masson. Hopefully the Orioles can avoid the sweep. And then I will be back tomorrow recapping everything you need to know from Orioles-Phillies Game 3. And speaking of, Trevor Rogers being something still fun to watch down the stretch, I'm going to talk about more of that on tomorrow's episode. This is not going well. The Orioles are out of it. They're playing bad baseball. What are the reasons there still are to watch this Orioles team over the final 2 months? I'll lay them out, including some roster battles, some rookies coming up, and much more. That is on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.